Russia today says that they don't want to occupy Ukraine, that they don't want to overturn the Zelenskyy government. When you hear that, what is your reaction?
Well, first of all, we have to be very careful. We all have to be very careful with Russian statements, be it good statements or bad statements. We have many propaganda statements throughout this 2 weeks of the war. But very important, what is taking place on the ground. What is taking place on the ground is a continuation of fighting, continuation of encircling or trying to encircle some cities and towns in Ukraine, continuation of trying to encircle the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, continuation to encircle a big city in the east of Ukraine, which is Kharkiv, continuation of bombarding and shelling over the civilian objects of Ukraine. So that is why we are absolutely resisting, like you rightfully said, during this war, and that's what we'll be doing this. If you ask me whether there is a diplomatic solution, surely we're ready for the diplomatic solution. You know, there were 3 rounds of negotiations already on the level of delegation. Tomorrow, our Minister of Foreign Affairs will meet together with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, with Foreign Minister Lavrov. But very important that my president is ready to have the direct negotiations with President Putin. We are ready to talk over a large spectrum of topics, but unfortunately, for the time being, we do not see that kind of readiness from President Putin himself. So we ask the world community to assist us in having these direct negotiations, to sit down with Putin at the negotiation table.
So you make it clear that for this to be a solution, or for there to be a solution, President Zelenskyy will have to sit down with Vladimir Putin. You still believe that that meeting needs to happen?
This meeting needs to happen in order to bring end to this awful war. But it will under no circumstances be on the Putin rules or being under Putin ultimatums. Our first and foremost precondition for having such kind of negotiations is the immediate ceasefire and starting with the withdrawal of Russian troops from the territory of Ukraine.
And, sir, you know that NATO has created so many tensions. This is an aspiration for Ukraine, but of course Russia says that this is the absolute red line, and that brings the issue of neutrality. What is neutrality, and what does neutrality mean for Ukraine? What are you open to discussing when it comes to neutral status?
Look, Ukraine is and will be aspiring to become a member of NATO, and you know that the percentage of those people who are supporting this goal is quite big. But let's think how NATO as an institution helped to Ukraine during this war. Unfortunately, this is not the case. We are working very intensively with some allies who are helping us, who are supporting us, providing us to us military equipment, ammunition, etc. But when we're talking about such important issues as, for instance, no-fly zone over Ukraine, or at least parts of Ukraine, or when we are talking about increasing our air defense capability or our air capabilities like fighter jets, unfortunately, we don't have enough response from NATO. So if you ask me, and it's not only you asking me, many people ask whether Ukraine is ready to discuss the neutrality status. The answer is yes, but at the same time, together with this discussion, the talk should be about hard security guarantees for Ukraine in this case. What does it mean? It means that all the neighbors of Ukraine, including Russia, together with big states such as US, Great Britain, Germany, Turkey, and some others, should give us strict guarantees of Ukraine's security. Not as it was in 1994, when Ukraine was deprived out of the 3rd largest nuclear potential and was given a piece of paper called Budapest Memorandum, which never worked, is not working now. So if this is the case, if the world community will provide us with security guarantees, together with Russia, who should also guarantee security and not repeating the situation, the aggressive war which is happening now, yes, this question is discussable.
So you've essentially, to really understand what you said, is that neutrality is an option, but you need to have very clear guidances that are binding, including from Russia and by extent Vladimir Putin, that Ukraine would be protected, respected, and its sovereignty would be upheld. I wonder, though, there are territories that are disputed between your country and Russia. You say that Crimea will be Ukrainian. The Donbass, you say this is our territory. Is that an area where you can compromise, or you would still say, this is our territory and we're not going to give up an inch?
No, definitely we will not trade our territories. Whatever the situation on the ground, we are not trading Ukrainian territories, not a single inch.
Not a single inch of Ukraine. And sir, you mentioned NATO. I wonder if you're disappointed by how slow the talks about the fighter jets are going, whether you've had any assurance from Poland or the United States that there will be a delivery, and when do you expect it to happen? Because we see that Russia does a lot of damage from the air, of course.
You're right, you are. We are following attentively the discussion which is going on now between the leadership of Poland and the leadership of the US. Again, my president just said today that it shouldn't be, a ping pong between those two or many more states. If you need the decisions on all the allies of NATO, or you need the decision from the US or Poland, let's take it. We badly need jets. We badly need fighter jets in order to defend the sky of Ukraine. Again, if NATO is not given to Ukraine a no-fly zone, and we understand this NATO is not given a no-fly zone to Ukraine, let's provide Ukraine with the capabilities which it lacks. Again, air defense and fighter jets. So yes, we urge all the members of the states on whom this decision depends to act very quickly. Every hour, every minute, a soldier or a civilian dying in Ukraine because of cruise missiles flying over Ukraine, hitting the civilian targets, or airplanes striking our cities.
And sir, what would be your message for countries that want to help Ukraine, but also fear if we provide weapons, then we may become a target for Russia? And that is scary. That is a concern. What is your message for them?
My message not to be fear of Putin. We are not afraid of Putin. We are fighting with Putin, and we are putting a stop to aggression in my country. All the countries should remember that if we will not together fight Putin today in Ukraine, tomorrow his aggression may spread to other EU and NATO members. He may start with Baltic states, proceed to Poland, and then, for Germany and for other states. So don't think that you could sit quietly, look, attentively what is going on in Ukraine. Be active participants in the Ukrainian events. Accept the weapons, which we still are waiting for in bigger quantity. We're looking for sanctions. Please be very active in introducing enlarged package of sanctions against Russia. Like, for instance, the sanctions which US just recently did, embargo on import of any Russian fossil fuels like crude oil, like gas, and like coal. Why not? It's high time for the EU states to have these kind of sanctions against Russia. The same goes about banking system. If you put SWIFT disconnection, then have it on all the banks of Russia rather than on some of them. Or please think about freezing all the accounts on the Russian accounts in the European and World banks. Or please think about closing all the seaports for the Russian goods and commodities. So still many more has to be done in the sphere of sanctions.
And tomorrow, of course, European leaders are going to have a very important meeting in France, in Versailles. It's going to go until Friday. What do you want to see coming out of this meeting? Because there's a lot on the agenda. You mentioned the banning the imports of oil. We know the Germans say they can't do it overnight. Then there's also the debate around Ukraine's membership to the EU. What do you want to see come Friday from European leaders?
We want to see the clear response for Ukraine's application to become an EU member. So a week ago, my president just summoned this application to the EU members. They started to proceed it together with some other countries like Moldova and Georgia, who climbed, the wagon together with Ukraine. What we want to have in the case of Ukraine is a speed up, swift procedure of thinking about our application, of making our application realistic. We do not have time for bureaucratic routine. We do not have time, for considering and thinking. Ukraine has already, doing much in terms of European security. We're defending the Europe. So let's take the security criteria to other Copenhagen criteria. So accept economics, politics, rule of law. Let's think about these criteria as well. Also, we already have the positive assessment of what Ukraine is doing in terms of association agreement. So this can also be considered as part of the Copenhagen criteria. So as a result of tomorrow's summit, we want to see the unanimous position of all the member states of the European Union that Ukraine deserves to be a member of the European Union very quickly.
So essentially your message is, after this war, we want to see a clear path that is almost immediate to becoming the 28th member of the Union.
Absolutely, and together with the rest of the European Union members to restore Ukraine, to open structural funds to Ukraine, to open a general fund for Ukraine to restore its economy and life. I think Ukraine deserves it. Today, fighting on the forefront of the United Europe, we deserve the support of all the European Union members to consider Ukraine as a full-fledged member of the European Union.
And sir, you talk about the end of the war and what's going to happen after the war. And of course, that gives people hope that this war could be coming to an end at one point. But I wonder, when it comes to your relationship with Russia and going back to the guarantees that you said you needed, especially for your security, how can you trust a man like Vladimir Putin after everything that's happening? It seems very difficult to believe that Ukraine is going to be able to have a normal relationship with Russia and its neighbors. Is Vladimir Putin someone that you could work with in the future?
Well, we have to understand that Russia will still remain a Ukrainian neighbor. I mean, we have this geographic position. But answering your question, that's why we are talking to the world community. That's why we need the support and mediation from the world community to sit down together with President Putin at the one negotiation table. Yes, the only security guarantees from Russia will not be enough. Again, the security guarantees from the world community, from the US, from Great Britain, from Germany will be important. Membership of the Ukraine in the European Union is also a kind of security guarantee for us. So please consider this option as well. So as many guarantors of Ukrainian security as possible, we should have.
And sir, just as a final question, of course, the Russians were expecting that this was going to be a very quick invasion. We've been now 14 days of this horrible, terrible war. They haven't really been able to capture major cities, not to the extent that they were hoping. We see that Ukrainians are fighting like hell. Do you have almost blind faith that you're going to win this war?
Definitely, we have the faith. They planned a blitzkrieg to conquer Ukraine over those 3 or 5 days, or to capture Kyiv within 1 or 2 days of their war. They failed. Now what they are doing is, trying to implement the humanitarian disaster in Ukraine. Look what's happening with the humanitarian corridors. Only today, we managed to have 5 or 6 major humanitarian corridors from North Ukraine, from the outskirts of Kyiv, from southern Ukraine, and from eastern Ukraine. But nothing, unfortunately, is happening in Mariupol, for instance, the city on the south of Ukraine, very important city, the city on the Sea of Azov. They're refusing to open the humanitarian corridor in the Mariupol, where there is a huge number of people. They are lacking water, they're lacking food, they're lacking electricity. So the world community should also pay attention to this, not let Putin to make a humanitarian disaster in Ukraine, or not to have a blackmail, any clear blackmail over Ukraine, because you remember the airstrikes on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, or today, not good the situation is happening in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, where they disconnected the grid supplies from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So we all have to be active in tackling these issues as well.
And you mentioned the nuclear plant. Just very briefly, do you have any updates on the situation on the ground there? Because some of the reports were concerning that a lot of perhaps the maintenance could be compromised because of lack of power. Do you have anything, new information over the past 2 hours of the status of that site?
Yeah, I don't have any new information, but the situation might become critical if we will not take the utmost attention to this.
Well, sir, thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg. As always, we appreciate your time, and of course, we wish you the best.
Many thanks.